Assalamualaikum everyone. This is a new video under the Contract Act 1872, and in this video, um, I will briefly discuss about the consideration and its essentials under the section 2D. Because consideration is very important part under the contract. If consideration has all of the essentials, then consideration will be valid and the contract will be enforceable. Otherwise, not. So first of all, uh, under the Contract Act, we should know about the consideration once again. So, when at the desire of the promiser, the promisee, or any other person who has done or abstain from doing, or does or abstain from doing, or promises to do or to abstain from doing something, such act of abstinence or promise is called a consideration for the promise. Simply, we have already learned before, if you promise someone to act or to abstain from doing anything is called consideration. So when a party to an agreement promises to do something, he must get something in return. This something is in return of consideration. The analysis of the above definition reveals that a consideration may be the value by which promise is bought. Of course, if you are going to buy a car upon certain sum of money like 2 million rupees, then your consideration is car because you want to buy that car, you want that object, and the other person's consideration is 2 million rupees, which actually is looking for after selling their car. So consideration is something which you get in return after delivering or giving your performance. So consideration may be following an act that is doing of something. You are giving your services. Services may be tuition service, consultancy service, medical service, or any sort of service in a legal way. The second one is abstinence or forbearance, abstaining or refraining from doing something. If someone give you money to stop you from doing anything, so it is also the consideration for him because he asks you to stop. I will pay you for it. So this is the consideration for himself, but the amount which you will receive upon your act of abstinence is your consideration and a written promise. If of course if you promise someone, another person has also promised you, that constitute a contract. So the promise is a consideration. So consideration is all about what you will get uh, after giving your performance under the Contract Act. Now, essential elements of consideration. So, if you have any case study or a business problem, you should first find out that whether there is a valid proposal. How you can find out? All essentials of a proposal should be available within a proposal. Similarly, all essential of acceptance should be available within an acceptance. So the same will be follow in the case of consideration as well. You will have to judge consideration by looking after the essentials of consideration, that whether they are available within the consideration or not. So let's start the essentials of consideration. The first one is the desire of the promiser. An act or abstinence of promise constituting consideration must have been done or made at the desire or request of the promiser. Thus, an act done at the desire of a third party or without the desire of a promiser cannot constitute a valid consideration. Of course, the initial part is the offer for any contract, and that offer must be delivered from the consent of the promiser, not by the willingness of a third person or not by the without free consent by the promiser. So it should be from the promiser, and promiser is willing to perform, and promiser is willing to give such consideration. So this is the first point regarding the essential elements of consideration. Now the second one is move from promisee or any other person. So of course, with reference to the point one, if the promiser is giving any consideration, then of course he is willing, he is looking for the consideration which for which he's actually performing or for which he's actually delivering his consideration. So that consideration uh, can be moved from the promisee or any other person. So in written consideration, maybe from the promisee himself or by any other person, even by a stranger itself. As we um, discuss about the quasi contract. Like you gave loan to Mr. B and you want him to pay back after a month. So after a month, he actually default and he is unable to pay back. So Mr. C, who's a friend of Mr. B, just came and not for by bona fide intention, he pay the sum of money on behalf of Mr. B to you, and there will be agreement between Mr. B and Mr. C that Mr. B will pay that money to Mr. C later on. So Mr. C is stranger for you. So consideration can be come from anywhere, even by the promisee or by the stranger. So these are the first two essentials of a consideration. The third one is consideration may be past, present, or future. The consideration may be past, done or abstain from doing, present, does or abstain from doing, or future, promises to do or to abstain from doing. So it can be at any time period. So the consideration which has actually performed already call as a past consideration, and the consideration which moves simultaneously, okay, and in the same time is called present consideration. The consideration which move after the formation of agreement is called a future consideration. So similarly, if any of the consideration that has been performed already is a past consideration, any consideration which will move simultaneously with the promise um, on time and the same time is a present consideration, and any consideration which will have to be performed in the future is called the future consideration. Now, consideration to have some value. So there should be some value within a consideration. But the most important thing, as we written here in the second line, that there should be something in written, and this something written need not necessarily be equal in value to something given. Like if you are selling gold of 10 gram and the market value of gold is, let's suppose, um, rupees 1 lakh. So maybe the other party is giving you rupees 80,000. So consideration not necessarily be equal. Now the question is that sir, you have taught in the other video that a rational person is a person who uh, actually made a contract and for his benefit. So sometime you want something very badly, okay? You are in need, and maybe that maybe the gold seller knew it that he want cash in urgency, and due to COVID the market is too slow, so he need cash like rupees 80,000. Okay, so he offers someone that, okay, this is gold of 10 gram and of costed 1 lakh rupees. Right now I'm giving you an 80,000. So if other person agree, then he may sell it, but the consideration should have some value. So his consideration value is 80,000 instead of 1 lakh, but 80,000 is very useful for him in that circumstances. So consideration to have some value, but the most important thing, it should not necessarily be of the same value against the other consideration. Consideration must be real, okay? It should not be illusory. It should be certain, and it should be, you can perform easily. Okay, you the consideration is not like that. You can just give me some money. I will bring you moon. Okay, and I will pick stars for you. No, this is not like that. Now, essential elements of consideration. The fifth one is something which the promise is not already bound to do. Okay, so it may be an act, abstinence, forbearance, or written promise. The consideration must be something which a promise is not already bound to do. Because a promise to do what a promise is already bound to do adds nothing to the existing obligations. Okay, if you are bound to give lecture to your students, and you are offering your student to provide you 5,000 rupees per hour to give you lecture, give your students a lecture. Now, why students are giving you, that teacher extra amount? Because they've already paid their tuition fees of the semester to that university in order to get lecture from any teacher. So that teacher is already bound to give lecture. So there is nothing extra in that obligation. Yes, if you are paying him to ask to get services, tuition services other than those classes in evening at your home or at their home, so then that may be counted as a consideration, but not those time on but not in that time when you're engaged in during the class hours. The consideration must neither be unlawful nor opposed to public policy. Okay, of course, we have already learned a lot about it. The consideration should be lawful. Like if you do contract with anyone that you want to buy drugs, so drugs are prohibited in Pakistan. The trade in drugs are not allowed. It's been forbidden. So the consideration should be lawful. Otherwise, the contract will be void, and it should be opposed to the public. It should not opposed to be a public policy. Agreement, the consideration object of which is partly unlawful. So according to section 24, if a party of a single consideration for one or more object on anyone or any part of any one of several conditions of a single object is unlawful, the agreement is void. Okay, if you uh, I've already discussed this I think, but here one is once again, if I'm giving someone rupees 5 lakh and ask him to deliver uh, rice of 2.5 lakh and remaining will be for the trade of drugs. So here the partial consideration is lawful, but the partial consideration is not lawful. So according to the section 24 of the Contract Act 1872, the whole contract has been void. Now, we have learned before that there should be a consideration in a contract. So what happened if agreements without consideration? So according to section 25, an agreement without consideration is void except in the following cases. So these are the cases where a contract without consideration is valid. So what are the exceptions? The first one is under the section 25 subsection A, natural love and affection. Agreement made on account of natural love and affection without consideration will be valid if it is expressed in writing, registered under the law, made on account of natural love and affection and between parties standing in a near relation to each other. So if you have a relationship with someone that exists or that based upon the natural love and affection, and you have made a contract with that person explicitly in writing form, and it should be registered under the law, and it has been made under the account of nature and love, and both parties are near to each other. Maybe that person is your spouse, is your parents or is your siblings or in-laws or anyone. So you may made a contract, and the contract is that you are paying them 40,000 rupees monthly. This is a valid contract. Okay, or you're giving your gold to your spouse. This is a valid contract. Okay, or you're gifting your own house to your spouse. This is a valid contract, because here the base of this contract is the natural love and affection under the section 25 subsection A of the Contract Act 1872. Here you are just because of your own house to your spouse, but you are not getting back anything from in the form of consideration from your spouse. The second one is promise to compensate past voluntary services. That is section 25 subsection 2. Okay, if promise made without consideration is valid if it is a promise to compensate and the person who is to be compensated has already done something voluntary or has done something which the promiser was legally bound to do. You have a car, and there is some issue in a car, but you do not have any money to give the mechanic. You just went to the mechanic workshop and asked him to give the services and promise him, I will pay you back the whole money when my salary will be credited into my account next month. So if that mechanic gives his assent and perform his performance, then this is also a valid contract, because you will have to pay when you will pay back that mechanic uh, the 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 services which the mechanic has given you was the past voluntary services, because at that time he did not get a single penny from you. So these type of contract are also a valid contract. Now the time bar that under the section 25.3, a promise to pay time bar that is enforceable if it is made in writing, it is signed by the debtor or his agent, and it relates to a debt which could not be enforced by a creditor because of law of limitation. So first of all, we should know about time bar debt. What is actually time bar debt? So time bar debt is actually money a consumer borrow and didn't repay, but which is no longer legally collectible because a certain number of years have passed. So time bar is also known as a debt that is beyond the statute of limitation. So time bar debt is typically debt that has passed the statute of limitation, cannot be collected, and normally, the statute of limitation for collecting credit card debt payment can range from 3 to 10 years, depending on the state. So, if such contract has been written in agreement, or it is signed by the debtor or his agent, and it will, and because of law of limitation, because law of limitations uh, has some prescribed years or duration, after which you cannot sue them, sue your opponent. So, if there is any TAMBA debt uh, that is has been written and signed by the debtor, but due to law of limitation, it cannot be enforced. So that contract is also valid without a consideration, because they maybe pay you back after at any time, because you have to wait only. You cannot sue them. Gifts, the gifts which are accepted by the donor are called completed gifts and are valid. Okay, because when you're giving someone a gift, you will not get the gift back, at least on that time. So it is legal, and it is there is not as other consideration from other side. So charitable subscription, where the promise on the strength of the promise makes commitment, changes position to the detriment. So charitable subscription is something different if you're you are paying a charity to any charitable organizations. So that charity organization is not paying you back anything, okay, and you are not willing to get back something from them. So this is also a valid contract and a contract of guarantee. So consideration received by the principal debtor is sufficient for the surety, and it is not necessary to result in some benefit to the surety himself. Like if you are giving loan to Mr. B and Mr. C is giving you surety that he will pay you back. So what will Mr. C is actually get in return? Nothing. He is actually just giving a guarantee, and that's it. So this is also a valid contract under the Contract Act 1872, where only one consideration is a part and not the other one. So this is all about the essentials of consideration. Thank you so much.